Margaret Campbell, the Duchess of Errol, had a hidden drawer in her house that was locked. When her husband finally got in, what was inside shocked him, and the set in the world of Margaret Wigham's young life set her up for a rock star adult life. A rich Scottish man where she grew up in New York City and went to some of the among the most exclusive private schools in the country with some of the best, the smartest and richest heirs and women of her time. But she seems to be drawn to scandal from a young age. When Margaret was 15 years old men were already crazy about her. Those beautiful women must have been Scots genes, and she quickly became enjoy all the attention. This summer of 1928, Margaret caught the eye of a boy named David Nevin, who is 18 years old, later became actor David Nevin in Hollywood. When we talk about Hollywood, what these two did was exciting enough for a drama story. David Nan met Margaret while they were on vacation together on the It was the best way to make white bread. To prepare for disaster with their parents and chaperones who weren't busy with their own vacation, the teens were able to give yourself enough time to explore their private landscapes. Even though Margaret's the first time she met Nan with a man one time was very too much, she had terrible luck. And found out months later that she was being pregnant in 1928 was a scary time to be a mother without a husband, so Margaret, as a last resort, she told her parents about it. About how she met Nevin and the more than one maid who worked for when the family put it all together, chaos broke out at that point. Her dad was even more. He was furious, but as soon as the shock was over for them, Margaret's parents knew what was going on. What they had to do for her family was proper, and they couldn't have a talk about their daughter's so-called humiliation, so they packed her up and put her in a nursing home in London where security guards did a very quiet the hush operation to end it. Was such a secret that Margaret didn't even write about it in her autobiography. Written almost 50 years later, just 2 years after this event, Margaret, a quick one on people. In 1930 her parents took her to court as a debutante, which was mainly how they did it to say she was ready to hang out with Margaret, had only men and get married, gotten more beautiful over time, and the court was done for the season. They named her their debutante of the year. She had a bunch of suitors, which was bad. Margaret had a lot of. There were always going to be romantic options. 'Cause trouble around this time, Margaret's behavior behind the scenes made people speak out. Specifically, she was wagging her tail supposedly looking for a wife or husband and stable, but she wasn't acting that way. Kept the pretty girl busy. High-powered women flirt and do other things. Prince Ali Kh and other brave men. Pilot Glenn Kidston, though Prince Ali loved to give Margaret huge amounts of, Kidston was the one who gave love and gifts. She really liked him, even though he was the most dangerous of all. Flyboy was married and had a child. Margaret still has a young toddler at home. Done head first anyway, making her stronger, being known as a bit of a Helen of Troy, though, before this affair could happen. Damage that can't be fixed to Khan's family life. Chaos broke out. Family life getting hit in the spring of Margaret's carefree life came to an end in 1931. Sudden stop that may have meant she got word that Glenn Kidston, her lover, had died in the terrible plane crash he was in through a dust storm. When all of the plane broke up under him, Margaret was completely. It broke her heart, but she didn't deal with it in the best ways. Grief is getting better. Getting over a breakup is always risky, and Margaret was getting over a full-on tragedy. After Khan's death, she quickly got engaged to Charles B. Rood, to the very rich Earl of Warwick, and agreed to another man's proposal. The publisher Air Mac signed close at the same time, and that wasn't even the most scandalous part. Instead of she dumped Gabriel or Aiken for either of them. They both left and went with someone else fully. The businessman and golf fan Charles. What she got was a bad dream, as Margaret got pregnant when she was a teen. Too easy, but when she did try to having kids with Sweeney, it led to It broke my heart. 8 miscarriages, and when she finally got pregnant, get pregnant for more than a few in late 1933, it got worse for a few months. She was 8 months pregnant, and getting ready to finally give birth. Sad to say, it wasn't meant to be her. The little girl was stillborn. Despite this tragedy, Margaret tried again and finally had 2 kids with Sweeney by 1940, but her problems lasted for a long time. Mental health scars back then. In 19403, things changed again when this woman was in her late 20s. Going to see her doctor on Bond Street when she tripped and fell 40 feet. lift shaft in a strange accident. From then on, nothing would be the same. Once more after the dust settled. Success. Rescuers found Margaret, and lucky for us, she was still alive, but there were troubling signs that what really took place as Margaret remembered that doctors thought she had to have grabbed the cable of the elevator. This is what most likely saved her life, because the nails were cut and bloody after 33 stitches in her head. In days spent as Margaret was getting better, doctors let her move back in with her family, but her husband, the woman who came back, was not the wife he knew before. Margaret's behavior had become unpredictable and impulsive and prone to nymphomania. Now that we look back, this may have been the at which point it all began. To the Duke unravel. To reach one of her goals was a broken promise to the Texan William Joseph Thomas, a banker, and a date with Theodore, the curator of the Metropolitan Rousseau, but these boys were just practicing for the man she was going to meet soon. After getting herself free of these meetups, Margaret talked to the man who would make her life bad. Ian Duncan Campbell, the handsome Scottish peer who was as the Duke of Arg. You were a good fit. With a scary face and a brusque, Campbell looked like he was every bit a heroic hero, and Margaret fell on top of each other. Heels. Campbell even had a cracked stay in Vere Castle to match his being moody. While Margaret had been married before she met the Duke, he had already been through 2 wives, and he had a bad track record. Assuring him that he was a troubled man still hurt from his time as a POW in Germany during the Second World War, World War II, which made him a well-known drunk and gambled a lot and was hooked on prescription drugs. On top of that, then that of both of his first wives claimed he had been mean to them. In short, Mary and should have left instead. Mary, she ran straight at him. She got married to Ian Campbell in March 1955. And was made Duchess of Artrick. On the surface, the process looked like she was on top of the world. The wedding belle of yet another class event. She had a title and a strong husband. And people still thought of her as one of the world's most stylish women, but she was already living behind the scenes a scary story. Getting married to Ian Campbell was it's like making a deal with the devil, and she knew it because the Duke told her. Before they signed their marriage vows was even dry. In a move he had lately pulled before Campbell started to siphon off the money Margaret brought in the union to bring back his ancestral seat at Inverary Castle. She was just a bank account, and then right around Margaret lost it this time. Herself in a scary elevator accident, or Margaret had never been the same person. Even her friends thought she was weird, had no sense of humor at all, and she called herself a bird brain because someone who said they were always was vain. Margaret always cared a lot more about how pretty she was than anything else. Just a few months after getting married, the Duke, Margaret already knew that she might have been one of the most beautiful women of her age, but to the Duke, she was just he could scare off another wife and push around and treat badly. Besides that, Margaret was also even more trouble having a child with him, which didn't make things better. In the end of her rope, she came up with a creepy plan. The Duchess is said to have started taking aim at the Duke's sons from his first marriage, even going so far as to make there were letters that said the boys were fake. It was a failed plan. Margaret learned how to keep her own power safe. Learned the hard way that cash can't buy, but sometimes it can buy happiness that makes you a child, and that's what she tried to follow through with her plan. To take the child in and get away with it, she passed him off as her own, which made him the Duke's real and legal heir. Nope, I don't get it either. I've never fallen 40 feet, though. The Duke of Gill had an elevator shaft. Always had doubts that his wife had looked around a lot, but he had never really been able to show that it was true. When Margaret became more active after dark and as he got farther away, the Duke committed a creepy breach of trust. He tapped Margaret's car wire so he could still know where she was at all times. That wasn't quite enough for him. It would be the couple's next chance to what went bad decline that began in the late 1950s. The Duke of Argyll was tired of waiting for his wife to come home. Plus another scary sign was that Mar had a locked cabinet in their house. In his dark he was driven by fantasies about what was inside. So mad that one day while she was in New York had a lot of time to sit and think. Getting even more scared, he called a locksmith and asked him to break in years ago. Just in case you remember, Margaret's first, Charles Sweeney, her husband, said that fall down an elevator shaft had fundamentally changed who she was and made her a nymphomaniac. The things that were in her, the whole thing was in a locked cabinet. truth, and it, among other things, was a set of very damning and photos from Polaroid that are too risque to describe these Polaroids in a video like this, which is meant to teach, and it's impossible to be not salacious after all of some of the pictures shown positions of intense intimacy with Margaret took off all of her clothes, and even though her face was usually hidden, the Duke could tell who she was by one sign that her favorite necklace was made up of 3 pearl strings. In the picture of the Duchess of Aragon was very much not by herself. She was seen putting on acts on men who were not at all the Duke of Argyll, sad to say, and important to everything that came after. The men's faces were often out of frame, which impossible to figure out when you find this proof that the Duke of Argyll turned around and began the divorce process in his court papers against Margaret. The Duke said Margaret had slept with at least 88 men over the course of because of their marriage. A lot of opened because of her husband's accusations and jaw-dropping proof Margaret couldn't just take it easy. She instead accused him of a horrible crime act in a countersuit. She said the Duke had also been unfaithful. But not with anyone. She said he had slept with Jane, her stepmother. Margaret Corby Wiggum looked like she was about to bring the Duke of Dukes down with her. The day she heard about his, she couldn't find a witness for her cheating and had to give up her case because of the 4 years that Margaret and her Duke were together going to court against each other. The press made wild guesses about all of Margaret's sins, calling her dirty Duchess because Margaret's secret box of photos was now proof for the public. The newspapers of the time had a full picture of the most well-known picture in one of Margaret's collections was where she was kneeling in front of a man without a head. He wasn't really headless, just that the picture really cropped out his head. After that, no one knew who he was. All this time, and reporters tried to in order to figure out who he might be, they found even more bad information about the music. Duchess, with 88 possible suitors to pick from, the press had a great time look for the man in picture 1. The man who kept showing up in Margaret's life history was in charge of defense for Britain, had Duncan Sandys, who would also go to become Winston Churchill's son-in-law if Sandy was the man without a head, wasn't a lover of Margaret's, and told her about him give up their jobs when the scandal broke. There is still a lot of talk about who just what the headless man was, but some researchers in the past think we can find the answer. They say that the man is to bet almost certainly Hollywood actor Douglas, at the time, Fairbanks Jr. was married. Even though the people in charge were able to keep his name was Hush Hush Fairbanks. The handwriting is said to match, though there was writing on the Margaret wasn't going to drag out the picture anyone else into the spotlight with her, and she didn't say anything. Named any of the men in the pictures the Duchess of Arran was let down by. At that time, Britain wasn't even close progressive, and she got an especially conservative judge in Lord Wheatley, who was in charge of the case, so in the end, Wheatley granted that he was very mean when he got a divorce, making fun of her by saying she was a promiscuous woman and completely wrong. It was the last thing that killed Dorothy's with honor. She was now a free woman. However, her real name was Mud. Sure, Margaret never told anyone the names of the man without a head or her other lovers, but she did try to make money on her own scandal, and the way she did it was embarrassing. When she started giving paid people can take tours of her house at 48 Upper Grower Street, also known as the house where her ex-husband lived, had first found those famous picture, Peggy, but there was more hope to lose. In some way Margaret couldn't get her bank account to match her. She eventually gave in to her fancy tastes, had to leave her well-known house, giving it up first for the bigger house hotel and then because she asked them to. Kids and her first husband Charles Sweeney one-room apartment building. Her the last bit of honor was circling in the late 1980s. The dirty drain Duchess came up with a new way to make some quick cash. She started to show up on TV shows, making cameo appearances, going to the talk show After Dark to talk about horse racing. In the middle the show that Margaret had to do After Dark was she broke her promise and walked away stage because she said she was so very sleepy. But the former Duchess of Argyll was well into her 70s at this point and could be forgiven for an early bedtime. It did point to by the early 1990s, her health was getting worse. Margaret could no longer look after them. Of herself and her kids, put her in an old age home, and here's where be one last terrible thing for her to go through. While one was in the bathroom of a nursing home, Margaret had a bad fall one day that she broke her neck, but not in the elevator this time. Margaret was far too weak to live. She passed away on July 25, 1993, and was buried next to her first husband. Husband Charles Sweeney, who had passed away just 4 months before, her legacy still lives on, and she is still an interesting thing. In 2022, Amazon put together a very British scandal based on her thrilling court case with her husband. It's safe to say that the Dirty Duchess would love the giving her the Hollywood treatment. For all that name is the same as scandal. Margaret Campbell was crazy about class and often held court about how to show the world who you are, as she did. It was once said, always a poodle, only a puppy and 3 strings of pearls. When put together, they are the important things to do in life.